Welcome back. Now, as schools will be opening tomorrow, most parents will obviously want to share their children's first day at school and usually go to online platforms to do so. So we might want to reconsider that, though, because parents are being urged not to share any pictures of their children on social media, as it might put them in danger. Now, sharing that cute photograph of your kid's first day at school may have harmless intentions on your part, but there are downsides to sharing too much information about your little ones online. And that's according to cybersecurity company ESET South Africa. And the question is, does any of this mean that parents shouldn't share their proudest moments online, or should they give up social media altogether, at least as far as their children are concerned? So to help us discuss this further, we joined virtually by the Southern Africa Chief Technology Officer at cybersecurity company ESET, Adrian Stanford. Adrian, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Adrian, you know, we think of first days, and those of us who may back in the day not have had a picture of us taken on our first day of school marking certain milestones may feel that, you know, we missed out on something. But of course, today, contemporary society comes with its own set of problems. So let's talk about that as parents are getting excited to snap away to show how cute their little ones look on the first day of school. What are some of the pitfalls that they should be wary of?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think, as you mentioned just now, it's such a relatable motivation. We all kind of get it. We understand it comes from a genuine, innocent place of good intentions. But perhaps we don't quite realize that there are actually a couple of really concerning risks, specifically around privacy, consent, mental health, and security. And I think we should be having a conversation about those risks.
So let's talk about it, because many children will be starting grade 1, grade R, and those parents, because they're really cute, these little bundles of joy, and parents will be snapping away for their own memories and for the children to use in later years, Adrian. But what should they consider? What should parents be considerate of before posting any pictures of their children online?
Sure. So maybe let's unpack some of those considerations that I mentioned now. So I think privacy and consent kind of go together quite nicely. So when you post online details of your children's lives, you are unfortunately removing some element of privacy from their lives. And one of the big problems is that, you know, years later when they've grown up or as they get older, they may not necessarily appreciate how they've been portrayed. Perhaps they find the content shameful or embarrassing. Even worse, they could be a victim of cyberbullying. So these are examples of how our actions today might have future consequences. And one of the problems is that this could create future resentment and a lack of trust between children and their parents. And that leads quite nicely to the next topic, which is of consent. Often parents are doing this without the consent of their children. I mean, certainly with young children, that's generally the case. And, you know, consent is a tricky issue here. You know, if you consider that us as adults don't always make the wisest judgment calls on what to share in our own lives on the internet, is it really fair then to expect when asking our children for consent, whether they can actually make a robust evaluation of all these implications now and in future, you know, when asking for their consent? I think it's a very complicated topic and it warrants a lot of serious consideration. The other issue with consent is that there are multiple layers of consent. You know, there's consent between children and parents. There's consent between, children and other parents and their kids. There's also the consent between institutions like schools and their students and their parents. So it's very nuanced and complicated. But, you know, perhaps if I can simplify it, you know, the general advice is to not do anything without the consent of everyone involved, and to just really consider carefully, you know, if you're going to ask children for their permission, whether or not they are well equipped to fully evaluate that.
Now, that right there is, you know, quite vexing, because how does a 5-year-old consent? So I'm taking this picture of my 5-year-old going to grade R. how does that conversation go where I'm trying to get consent from a 5-year-old as a parent to say, hey, listen, I'm taking this picture of you. Is it okay if I post it on my social media platform because I'm so proud of you and I just want to share this proud moment with everybody else?
Exactly, and that's exactly the point, we're discussing here is that, obviously it depends on the age. A 5-year-old will have a different capacity to a 15-year-old. But, I would, so with very young children, I think it really is up to the parents to make the decision and to make a wise decision. You really want to think about, with a young child, I think with consent, think about how they might feel about it in future and try to make a wise call on that. With older children, I would still argue that young people perhaps don't necessarily have enough life experience to fully grasp how this might impact their futures. So, yeah, consent is a tricky one, and I don't think it's an easily answered question, to be honest.
And when we look at cybersecurity, as we have been saying, sometimes these images of your children, you take them, you post them innocently. But of course, let's just get into, Adrian, those dangers that are lurking, especially online, because we know some amongst us are not innocent-minded with certain things that we may not see the dangers in.
Exactly. And I mean, there are a multitude of cybersecurity and physical security concerns. I think maybe we can consider the general principle of sharing personal information on the internet. Generally, the more personal information, whether it's about yourself or your children, the more information you put online, the more at risk you are. So typically the risks come in the form of social engineering, which is a big topic on its own. But roughly speaking, we're talking about malicious actors trying to manipulate or deceive their way, trick their way into sensitive parts of your life. And the more information you publish, the more of a head start you give them. The other, perhaps, well, not the only other, but perhaps a more recent consideration in security is the advent of generative AI and things like deepfake AI. So this is technology that can very convincingly and very realistically create fake but convincing images, movies, or even voice imitations of yourself or your children. So if you're posting a lot of content online of your children that includes their faces, video clips with their voices, it's quite easy for a malicious actor to use that as training data, feed it into this kind of AI technology, and they can create a video or a photo of your child that looks very realistic, and they can ask, it can be of your child doing anything they can imagine. So we don't have to imagine too hard how harmful that can potentially be.
And speaking of, one of the issues that we are also having to contend with these days is the issue of kidnapping and, how people are able to manipulate information in order to facilitate crimes such as that.
Exactly. So there's a physical safety aspect as well. If you're revealing information about your children's school or even, just your home address, anything like that, it opens the risk to physical security concerns like abduction or home invasion and things like that. So, yeah, there's absolutely that consideration as well.
Adrian, what does the law say about, posting images of children online? So, for example, schools opening tomorrow, it's a big day. Media outlets will also be out in full force trying to cover this particular event. But what does the Protection of Personal Information Act say in terms of compliance for parents and broader society when it comes to children's personal information?
So I'm not a legal expert, but from what I understand of the POPI Act, when it comes to children and their personal information occupy a special category, if you will, within the POPI law, which basically means we need to be extra careful with the personal information of children. So my general advice would be, consider that in mind. I don't think I'm well placed to comment exactly on the legal ramifications, but rather just let's err on the side of caution, when it comes to the legal side of things.
And that's fair. That's fair. So, Adrian, just to sum it up, what are healthy digital online safety habits, and what should parents be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so, the truth of the matter is, it's the safest option is to just not post at all. And that might seem quite restrictive or even impractical to some people. And if that is the case, there are some things that we can do. If you really feel compelled to post online, then there are some things that we can do to improve the risk profile associated with that behavior. I always like to consider the what and the how. So we want to think very carefully about what we're posting. So if it's a photo or content, we want to think, is this appropriate? How might my child feel about how they are being portrayed both now and in the future? Things like that. We want to eliminate personal information as much as possible. And, you should think about how much information is actually contained in a photograph. It's quite alarming. So we want to think about what we post. And then we also want to think about how we post. And what I mean by that is most social media platforms give you some level of control over privacy. So you can usually control who your followers are, whether your profile is public or private, and perhaps which groups of your followers can see what kind of content. So it's good to review those settings and configure them more tightly. It does not fully eliminate the risk, but it does significantly improve the element of privacy and reduce the risk.
So to that point, is it possible then to hide the metadata of an image on social media platforms?
It is possible. So maybe just to add some context to that question, whenever you take a photo or video on any device, there's always extra data encoded into the file. Now, it is a good idea to remove that from the photo or video, and you can do that using free apps on your phone or on your desktop computer. Sometimes social media apps do it for you, but I would say that one of the biggest problems is actually the metadata that we ourselves add to the post. So even if we've stripped out the metadata from the file, we go and we create a post, and then we add the location and we add a caption that then adds the information back. So as much as removing metadata is an effective strategy, I think what warrants more consideration is exactly the information we choose to intentionally reveal.
Well, Adrian, thank you so much. I mean, great insights in terms of what parents should be on the lookout for. Try to pull yourself towards yourself, parents, not oversharing, of what is going to happen on the first day of school. We know it's a proud moment, but of course, as Adrian was pointing out there, please try and restrain yourself. And perhaps, as he said, the best thing would be not to share, but if you have to share, just be considerate of what the pitfalls may be. Adrian Stanford is the Southern Africa Chief Technology Officer at cybersecurity company ESET, speaking about some of the dangers of sharing photographs of your child's first day at school online. And also very interesting that Adrian pointed out the issue of consent. And that should make, for a very interesting conversation with your children. I know the teens are very clear, don't post, pictures of me. But the little ones, when it comes to the little ones, just pay a little more thought to that.